All right, welcome folks. For those that don't know me, my name is Anna Holder. I am an environmental scientist at the State Water Board. I'm a co-chair of the Safety Work Group. And can y'all share my screen or see my screen? Okay, great. So today is a different flavor of the stew, as it were. We're going to be focusing on the long-term monitoring priorities assessment process as a whole, and the majority of this time, over half of the meeting time, is basically going to be an open forum for folks to ask questions. If you came with members of your region or your team and you want to co-work, I can push you into a breakout group. So really open. I'm going to start with just a grounding and a presentation so that we all have the same information going forward, with some updates and timelines and things like that. But then after that, I'm going to pass it back to you for questions and things like that. So we're all Zoom pros at this point, but as I mentioned, I'm flying solo today. So please turn your cameras on. I'd love to see your faces if you feel comfortable. Mute and unmute liberally, and use your reactions to raise your hand if you don't feel comfortable unmuting on your own or anything like that. If you could rename yourself, so I recognize all of your names, but just in case someone else joins, they can rename themselves, so it's not like, iPhone 7425 or whatever the random thing is that Zoom has for you. And we're recording this so that we can share it with others that aren't able to join. And there are people in the waiting room, so let me admit them. And I like to start all of our safety work group meetings acknowledging tribal lands in California. There are close to 200 tribal nations in our beautiful state, more than any other state in the United States. And it's really important to think about and understand and acknowledge that the hub of this work group is the Cali PA building. And we're all on tribal lands throughout the state. And I really like to center and remember and acknowledge these tribes at the core of this work so that as we move forward, we can advance equity and bring those communities in with us, and partner with those governments as we try and protect water quality throughout California. So I want to do a quick roll call just to see what's happening. And I'm going to start with the peer review panel. I think I saw some folks, and feel free to unmute and say hi.
Harry Ohlendorf here.
Awesome. Thanks, Harry. US EPA? OEHA?
Wes here.
Hi, good morning. Lauren Chumney here.
Hey, Wes. Hey, Lauren.
Grand fam. Hi.
Hey, Trian. Moss Landing?
Bonama?
Gary Chikawa.
Lee Jekyll.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Regional boards, let's start with Region 9. Surprise.
Carrie's here. I think Chad and Debbie also, but I'll let them chime in.
Chad here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound good.
Thanks.
And Debbie, Debbie Woodward.
Great, welcome, Debbie. Thanks for joining. Region 8. 7. 6.
Hi, Kelly Huck is here.
Lori Screeb is here too.
Hey, Lori. 5. 4. Region 3. 2.
Melissa Doherty's here.
Hey, Melissa.
Christina Yoshida is here.
Hey, Christina.
Kevin Lundy.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey.
Gerardo Martinez.
Good morning, Gerardo.
Good morning.
Region 1.
Brendan Thompson.
Hey, Brendan, welcome.
Thanks.
Mike Thomas.
Hey, Mike.
Morning.
Okay, water boards. Anyone, because there's not a buku number of us. Cool. And I don't see Nick or Peter from the Monitoring Council. Did I miss anyone? Okay, great. So like I mentioned, I'm gonna give a brief presentation just to ground us all on what the heck this assessment thingy majobber is, provide an update on some timelines, and then most of this time will be for Q&A. So if at any point you're like, I got what I need, I'm out, that's fine, I won't be offended. And then if everyone leaves before the end of the meeting, then I will stop the meeting and go about my business. Or I can hang out if people have questions and want to walk through things. This time is mostly for you. So, we've been talking about this long-term monitoring priorities assessment for quite some time, and now we're in it. It's happening. It's starting. And the goals are really to hear from you all about what your bioaccumulation monitoring priorities are for the next 5 to 10 years. And really think about, based on what everyone's needs are, how we can most effectively use our statewide program funds, and then also leverage the work that you all are doing and additional partners to make all of our dollars stretch further and have the most impact. So all of you probably know this already, but the bioaccumulation monitoring program has been doing its thing since early 2000s. And we're at a point where we're wrapping up all of the original monitoring plans that we had for the coast and lakes, and rivers is another story. And we're also at a kind of transition point in terms of our contracts, and things like that. So we want to use this time to really pivot wisely. So we're planning on wrapping up the coastal survey next year in 2024. But then after that, we've got tentative plans, but they're tentative with a capital T. And we want to use these conversations and this process to help solidify definitely our plans for 2025 and 2026, but then also get a clearer view of how we want to move forward beyond that. So just kind of big picture, when I talk about a pivot, I'm going to go through some things that if you were at the last safety workgroup meeting, you're like, oh, deja vu. It's because I had said this before, so you're not crazy. We've been monitoring lakes and reservoirs, coastal areas, and rivers and streams, every couple of years, every 10 years, depending on the water body. And so this is just like a big picture view of where our, standard sampling locations are. At all of those places, we've been collecting different types of data, different analytes, mostly focusing on mercury and selenium, maybe some PCBs, and other things as requested. And the feedback process, this is pretty general and with the lens of my experience, which is the last couple of years as the co-chair. So for those that have been around longer than I have, you're like, that's not accurate. You're probably right. But this is just the framing that I've got. So the monitoring feedback process has been, y'all created monitoring plans 5 to 10 years ago, and we've been doing the monitoring. the July or August before the year of monitoring, we generally present a draft monitoring plan and put a call out for requests, mainly from regional boards and OEHA that are due in September. I think the deadline has been maybe a little bit later in years past. And then December, January, again, this might be wrong. Moss Landing people, I apologize, but you can correct me. Permit magic happens. We present the final monitoring plan, and then we monitor April to October. Now, as we pivot to, Autumn, did you want to make a correction?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that submitting the permits in December, January doesn't give us enough time. It can.
I'll get there.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I got you covered. Don't worry.
Okay. Cool.
So I just made these slides all by my lonesome, and usually Autumn and Jay get a sneak peek. So surprise. Yeah. So as we pivot, we need to, acknowledge and adapt to the fact that we've got a stagnant budget for the program, and costs of things are not stagnant, and in fact, much more, as we all know. We also want to accommodate equity priorities, the realignment process, and our swamp management priorities. But then in addition to all of those things, and really centering the bioaccumulation community, we want to take into account your priorities as regional water boards, as other agency, tribe, organization partners, and also think about, mercury's been the focus for a very long time for very good reasons, but we've got a lot of other contaminants that we might want to increase the robustness of our data, like PFAS, for example, and I'm sure many, many others. And as I mentioned, leveraging other efforts to get the biggest bang for a buck. So as I mentioned at the last safety workgroup meeting, as I'm, doing my dishes or gardening, I'm thinking about how we can change how we monitor to make our dollars go farther. Rivers and streams have not been as, we haven't received a return on our investment. Getting out there is really expensive for a multitude of reasons. So maybe we pair that with a realignment, or as regions can contribute funds to the rivers. Again, these are all just Anna crazy ideas. Nothing is set in stone, and nothing will be set in stone until I hear from you. But this is kind of what I'm thinking. So maybe we drop rivers as a standard monitoring location and focus on lakes and reservoirs and coastal areas to beef up and add more locations where we have those data gaps. In terms of analytes, maybe we analyze for mercury less often. That's not our every sample gets a mercury analysis as we are doing now. And maybe we, prioritize other analytes and sample those more. I don't know. I want to hear from you. And then the future feedback process. So again, I want to kind of think about a firm 5-year plan for monitoring, but then a softer 10-year plan after that. So the next time we transition, it's we're not going off of plans from 20 years ago. So about a year before monitoring starts, as Autumn was getting to, we need to submit our permits with as much breadth and scope as we possibly can, because it takes so long to get them in order for us to monitor on time. So we want to kind of like factor that into why we need a firm 5-year plan. The July prior to monitoring, I want to move all of our standard, timelines up so that we can accommodate that permitting process. So in July every year, I want to present our, draft monitoring plan in terms of like update from the long-term plan, and then submit the call for requests. Again, have them due by September, potentially earlier, depending on the recommendations we get from our Moss Landing partners and folks that are managing and submitting the permits. But then in addition to our regional board and OEHA partners, I'd really like to hear more regularly from tribes and other monitoring programs. So when we do the annual call for requests, I want to make sure we can open it up and hear from more folks. And that's something that I need to focus on. And then again, the January prior to monitoring, we present the final monitoring plan and note that the monitoring season is a little bit more broad, not because we're monitoring during that whole time, but because climate change, and we might need to shift things. So as I mentioned, we're starting the long-term monitoring priorities assessment now, as many of you know. And at the end of this, I think it's going to take us, 4 to 5 months. I want to get a firm 5-year plan, soft 10-year plan, and really be able to articulate the specifics enough to submit permits for 25 and hopefully also mostly for 26. So y'all are here because I've been scaring you about update templates. For the water boards folks, I've heard from a lot of you. I'd like those submitted by November 30th. If you need another week, I can be kind, but I would like to hear from you to know that you're working on it. And at the very least, send me your availability for presenting by the 30th. Tribes, agencies, and other organizations, I want to hear from you by January 1st. You don't need to have a template completed. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But that template is there as a resource, as a starting point, if it's helpful for you. Okay. So I've also developed a survey that if folks just can't, regional boards and other partners, if you don't want to present or you don't have the capacity to complete a template and you just want to give really quick feedback, this survey is available. So if you are completing a template, do not fill out the survey. If you are not completing a template or presenting and you still want to provide feedback, this survey is another way to do that. Doing so by March 1st, so that we can kind of factor that in when we start the decision-making process. It's 10 questions, 3 optional, so this can be anonymous if you'd like, about your name, affiliation, and email if we want to follow up with you or partner moving forward. There are 4 required multiple choice questions that I'll go over in a second. And then 3 optional open-ended questions after all of the required. So if folks want to elaborate or provide more specifics, they can do that. The required questions, just understanding where this request is coming from, what type of government agency or organization you're affiliated with, which water body types would you like to see prioritized? So it's a question of lakes, reservoirs, coastal areas, and rivers and streams, and you got to pick 2. What type of species would you like to see prioritized for sampling? And there's always an other option for these too. So it's fish or shellfish and then other, and you get to pick 1. And then which pollutants and contaminants would you like to see prioritized during analysis? There are 10 options that are reflective of the slide that I brought up a little bit ago. And you get to pick 5. I'm not going to hold anyone to these. It's just kind of a pulse check to see where, if we had to make the hard choices, when we have to make the hard choices, what do people want to see? We've also added more safety workgroup meetings on the books to really prioritize this process and gathering your feedback. So the next one is December 20th. After that, January 24th, where I'd like to have the water boards folks present their priorities. So you can just pull up your template and walk us through it. You can freestyle and reference your template. You can make slides. There's no, specific requirement on what your presentation looks like. I would recommend just using the template since you already put your time investment in that. And then January 31st and February 28th, I'd really love to hear from our tribe, agency, and community-based organization partners. So again, you are not required to fill out a template. You can just come and speak. You can send slides. You can share whatever information you want to share and however you would like to share it. In March, I'm going to try and start to synthesize everything and really find the common themes across all of the feedback that we've received. That's why that survey is due March 1st. So I've got a couple weeks to kind of process that along with everything else that we've heard through the presentations December through February. And then start to think about priorities and making those hard decisions. In April, we'll kind of present the final priorities and articulate the next steps. And then after that, it's our regular quarterly safety workgroup meetings. So a couple of things to note about these meetings. Based on the feedback we received at the last meeting, we've now enabled registration. So folks have to register to attend the meetings. Registration is open until after the meeting time. So if you register that day, you'll get the meeting link, no big deal. The benefit of being able to register is in your confirmation, you can then download a calendar invitation and have the calendar invite with the information ready to go. So all of the meetings with an asterisk at the end are the regular safety workgroup meetings. You can click that first link in January and register for all of them at once. All of the others, there's no like recurring theme to them. So you have to register for them individually. I apologize. I know that's a pain in the chuckus. Believe me, I created them, so I know.
Hey, and I had a question for you. If it is it possible to send out a calendar hold for water board staff for us to help with tracking the timelines and getting people to show up? I know it won't work because we won't be a Teams meeting, right? It'll be an individual Zoom link, but I think that might help with some of our calendar tracking.
Technically, it is possible. I'm going to recommend that people just register. And then you have the calendar information, you have the login information. And I do that because I don't want to spam all of the water boards with a calendar hold that we already get so much of that. So I'm going to just focus on the registration, and you can do that now and you'll be done through the rest of the year and you'll have everything you need. That way you can opt in instead of having to opt out of everything. Yeah, Lori.
Are these links or the registration links? I see obviously they're in the slides here, but are they on like the STU's webpage, or where do we get them aside from seeing them here in the presentation?
Yeah, so December is on the safety workgroup webpage. I was waiting for this meeting so that people weren't like the webpage didn't get super crazy. But in December, I'm going to add everything else on the webpage. So they're also in the slide deck. They're in the meeting notes for this meeting. But yeah, I'll be adding them to the webpage like front and center in December.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Okay, so now it's your time to shine. Are there any questions about the process, templates, whatever you want? Yeah, Brennan.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question about tribal engagement. Here in Region 1, it's important to us that all our tribes know about this effort and are involved. Is the state board coordinating outreach to all tribes, or is that something you want the regional boards to help with, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, so I wanted to be able to post this recording with that outreach email and these slides because it's a nice synthesis. So I will be sending out an email to the tribal email list, the listserv that we have. But it's always good if you have tribal partners that you know they're interested in bioaccumulation. Hearing that directly from you is, I think, more powerful than an random email from me. So yeah, if you know of folks, tribes and otherwise, that you think would want to listen in, present anything, or just be aware of the Safe to Eat work group, I'd love help getting connections and meeting folks.
And do you have some kind of list of tribes that are already actively engaged in this work group?
It's small, and just like the people in this call, not everyone can make it to every meeting. And so that's not a list that I'm going to be sharing, just because I don't think that would actually be helpful. So yeah, I'm always looking for more folks, and through the engagement activities that I've been doing in OEMA at large as their tribal coordinator, I'm starting to make more connections and get a better understanding of the tribal governments that are already doing this monitoring or wanting to roll up monitoring and things like that. Okay. So yeah, in progress, but always could use more help. Thanks for asking. Any other questions? Yeah, Lori.
Me again. When we were going through and looking at the template and thinking about fish and fish species, and this is not really Kelly and I's wheelhouse, neither one of us fish. We were curious about engagement with Department of Fish and Wildlife. Do they regularly attend the STU meetings? Do we have like a consistent contact? And how are they part of this process, being that they manage fisheries?
Yeah, so there are a couple of California Fish and Wildlife folks that attend periodically. I wouldn't necessarily put the label on them as representatives of the agency, just because I don't want to force the label on anyone if they don't opt into it. But I have been kind of reaching out and connecting with a couple of folks at Fish and Wildlife. And so they're aware of the process. They're signed up to the email list. And I've mentioned that hearing from them would be really helpful moving forward.
Yeah, and especially in terms of, where is lots of fish consumption, where is fishing occurring, where do they have, activities that they manage of interest and types of fish and things like that. I think it'd be super helpful. So thanks for reaching out and trying to engage them.
Yeah. Autumn?
Melissa Doherty put a question in the chat for you.
Thanks.
She asks, if we are not confident that we can get all the sections filled out in the template for the different program perspectives before the deadline, would it be better to use the survey and maybe submit a partial template to you separately?
Great question. I would prefer that the regional boards complete the template, just because it asks about triennial review and tribal beneficial uses and basin plans. And it probably, for your perspective, maybe unkindly forces you to think about monitoring in a holistic sense. And that's the kind of lens that I want to bring in. So if you can't make November 30th, which is tomorrow, shoot me an email and we can talk. I don't want it to be a long-term extension. I'm talking maybe only a week till the 8th. But at the very least, I want to know that you're working on it and your availability. I think Adriana was next.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Hello. I just wanted to say, if Region 1 wanted to get in contact with the tribes, contact your tribal coordinator. They will have those lists for you and how you call it, because it is, of course, extremely important that we contact our tribes and send them an email, if they do have an email, and if if the tribes do not have an email, then of course send a hard copy to them and make sure to address it to the primary environmental contact. Or if they don't have an primary environmental contact, then it has to be the chair. So yes, so contact your tribal coordinator.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Adriana. That's a great point. And I sent I don't know if you were on that email, Brendan, but I did send an email to all of the regional water board folks and Division of Water Quality with a list that includes who your tribal coordinator is. So definitely reach out to your tribal coordinator if you want to do additional outreach. If you're already talking to tribes, they know who you are, you're already working with them, you know, shooting that individual an email, say, hey, you might be interested in this, that's totally fine. But if your region wants to do a broader outreach, then definitely please speak with your tribal coordinator because they know all of the contact best practices and things like that. And they
yeah, and that's why I was asking if you had a list of who's already engaged so that we could target our outreach better.
Yeah.
To have that information, who is already engaged in this process.
Yeah, I haven't heard from any tribes opting into this specific process yet. It's mostly been, from my experience, just like, who the heck is this Anna lady and what is she doing with bioaccumulation, which is great. And I want more of that. But yeah, if that helps. I think Gary was next.
Yes, hi, I'm Gary Ichikawa, working with Moss Landing, and I was formerly with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm retired now, but I do a lot of the site coordinations before we get out there to do our sampling. And if we did have a list of any contacts of anywhere you guys are requesting us to sample fish, that would be helpful. Otherwise, I just start from scratch on the internet and try to find out who's operating, owns, or gives us permission to those areas. So any kind of help would be time saving for us. Also, prior to going out sampling, I contact the regional biologists with Fish and Wildlife, so they do know that we are coming. I notify the wardens also, so they're aware that we're going to be out there. So that's kind of Fish and Wildlife's involvement at this point. They don't have a dedicated person dealing with it. I used to be that person, but have since been retired. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Very busy in your retirement. Yeah, Kevin.
You know, I was curious to ask, kind of going back to like the past study design and thinking about the questions. Those were kind of a lot of question-based decisions, like, are fish safe to eat?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, essentially, have we answered the questions we need to answer? Or do those programs still need to continue? Because we really, you know, have gotten a part of the answer, but need more. So I think that's an important part of the discussion. I'm kind of curious if that's either already happened or if you plan on kind of bringing that statewide lens. What have we answered from the different coastal programs, river programs? What are the possible next steps? So we see those and can give kind of more constructive input on our perspective on the statewide efforts.
Yeah, I definitely have my perspective on if we've answered the original questions. I think in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. I can dive into more specifics if you'd like, but what I'm most interested in hearing about for this part of the process is what questions still remain for you all, regardless of what State Board thinks in terms of if we've answered the questions adequately. I might think yes, but for your region or tribe or agency, you might have a firm no, and we need more of this type of information. That's what I want to hear about. And then we'll factor all of that in together as we move forward and either, you know, create an entirely new sampling design or modify or repeat or adapt or whatever it might be. I don't have a clear vision of what I think is going to happen. And that's intentional. I know that makes people really uncomfortable. Like, there goes Anna just going in without a plan again. But the plan is to not have a plan so that I can create it with you.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds great. I think what would help that is to have someone tell us, like, what was the point of that program? What have we learned? What did the final report kind of conclude? What are the next, and then almost think, because we could look at specific programs and think about sampling a little less often, right? Or radically, and totally change things. And the door's open to do that. Oh, let's just stop that part of the program entirely. But we need someone who knows about each of those programs to give us a talk, kind of explain what it was doing, why it was designed that way, and a perspective on whether it's kind of achieved its goals or not, based on kind of the collective wisdom that's out there.
Sure.
I think that would really help the group also to be able to provide comments on the statewide parts. Of course, we'll filter in our kind of regional needs and requests.
So don't worry about statewide stuff right now. Just focus on your region's needs. In terms of if we've answered the original questions, Allie, feel free to jump in here. The bioaccumulation monitoring program was created to assess fish and shellfish throughout the state of California at all water bodies at all times, and that's not a thing. That never happened. So from the start, we've had data gaps from our original legislative mandate. The key focus was mercury metals, mercury, selenium, and PCBs. I think to protect water quality, to help develop TMDLs, things like that. We know the mercury is in a lot of places. We know that if it's there, it's probably not getting much better. So from what I understand in terms of this off the cuff briefing or whatever that you want, I don't know if mercury is still relevant in the same way that it was 20 years ago. I'm hearing more about PFAS and microplastics and harmful algal blooms, and those huge data gaps in terms of the need of the next 20 years. That's my assessment of what I know right now off the cuff. I will say we're still waiting on organics data from the past couple of years for the coast and lakes and reservoirs. So we won't have a full synthesis of that until we get our organics data from our lab. And that is being delayed for a multitude of reasons that we're not going to get into. So we might have to make decisions before we have all of the organics data, but I don't think receiving that will change my perspective significantly. Does that help?
It helps. It's a request, though, I guess, because it's not something you can answer kind of on the fly. So I think as a matter of process, some people are new to the STU program here, or somewhat newer, at least for us, for like Gerardo. And I think it's valuable for the statewide program to kind of share an update on, this was the process. We studied this for X number of years. These are the main reports we produced. These are the questions. This is how we answered part of that question.
Yeah.
And that would help people see what is left to do with the statewide work. Should we, because we don't want to just say like, oh, we could do anything we want, right? Which is great. We can. That's good. The door's open to be flexible. But if we're going to change something that has a nice trend analysis, a lot of times a program says, we've done a trend analysis. Here's 10 years of data, or 20 for this case, right? Is there a trend in mercury? No, then let's stop studying it. Okay. Sure. And we have kind of the expertise of those who've been in the program for a while and advising on the science to say, yeah, this trend is consistent or not. And I think that will help. Of course, we'll provide our regional kind of ideas still, but I think since the door is like, oh, well, we might stop the coastal program, or we might stop the lakes program, or change it drastically. I think it's really important to know what we're changing and how that would affect those long-term questions.
Yeah, I hear you. I just want to underscore that we're needing information for permits probably sooner than we're going to have the data to be able to make that complete assessment and presentation. Period. So,
for the next year, totally agree. For the next, for like year, 2025, 2026, need permits, get it. But you were saying you want a 5 to 10 year plan for the program.
Yeah.
So for that, I think we really want to think about what was the program trying to do? Did we succeed?
Yep. I'm going to stop you there, Kevin. I hear you. We'll give it to you. But I need your regional priorities in 2 weeks. And you're not going to get what you want in those 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah, clearly. Yeah.
Cool.
But that'll
Thanks.
Help this discussion.
Hey, Autumn. Thanks. Just curious on what your thoughts are concerning harmful algal blooms and possibly working with the water board program as it is currently, those being more of an episodic sort of presence in the environment versus more of our long-lived contaminants.
Yeah, so we've actually started thinking about that with our statewide freshwater harmful algal bloom program through the San Diego region realignment. I can circle back with them. We incorporated collecting water samples to understand baseline cyanotoxins in I think it was the lakes and reservoirs that we monitored at that time. And we focused on water samples because the science and efficacy of monitoring tissue in fish and shellfish at that time that we were making that decision was not up to snuff in terms of being robust and cost effective. So it's something worth exploring. And definitely if I hear from more regions and tribes and things like that about wanting to focus on harmful algal blooms moving forward, I think it's something worth exploring. I know our statewide harmful algal bloom program is working on creating a monitoring strategy. I know that's not the right name, Allie. Please correct me if you're still there. And could include components of that. So I do think it's worthwhile to loop in our HABs teams and partners. Again, assuming that's of priority for a lot of folks in the bioaccumulation community.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just curious because it's a different world a bit.
Totally. Yeah. And it's something, I'm hearing a lot, particularly with harmful algal blooms from the tribal folks that I communicate with, because it's like an immediate issue. That is front of mind for a lot of folks. Yeah, Lori?
Hi, thanks. I'm like one of those people who's kind of come in new in the last year and is trying to get up to speed and, understand sort of how all the process works and program. And I did go back and look at some of the original, study plans for the Bass Lake surveys and trying to figure out, how long, what was the original intent of that? And so I do think it would be helpful to reiterate what was said earlier that, at some point when all the data comes in to kind of have that synthesized would be good. I had a couple questions. One, thinking about mercury, or maybe it's more of a comment. There's lots of lakes out there and streams that have not been sampled yet. Mm-hmm. So is it too soon to put mercury on the shelf for places where it has never been assessed? Like if we've done assessments and we know it's there, we know that there's already an advisory there, then I can see, is it worth repeating? Does it change? I don't know. This is not my kind of wheelhouse and, environmental toxicology kind of stuff, but so it may still seem relevant to places where it has never been assessed to me. Mm-hmm. And then kind of thinking about analytes and PFAS, obviously HABs is still emerging and the science is emerging. And I was curious with PFAS, like if we did select to look at that in fish tissue, does OWIHA actually have the pieces in place on their side to issue or say something is safe or not safe for consumption. I don't know that much about where OEHA is at with PFAS and PFOA. So that was kind of a question I had related to OEHA. Other questions related to OEHA, the amount of time that it takes between sampling, the data analysis, so, data processing, tissue processing for the data, and then getting it to OEHA. Like, we're still waiting for advisories or information from monitoring that, was done 4, 5, 6 years ago. Like, how do we track that? Like, coming in for me, I'm like, what was done? When was it done? There's so many things to get through to like kind of synthesize the information. I'm just wondering, is there a way to speed up that process, or how do we it's frustrating that we're still waiting for things that were collected in 2016. So I guess that's sort of a comment and a question of how do we keep track with OEHA, and how do we know where we are in their queue for processing? Sorry, lots of questions on coming from.
Yeah, I might pause you there. I have a feeling you might have more, but I want to pause you there. So
that's mostly it.
Wes, Lauren, and I can tag team the response. I will say, Lauren gave a great presentation a couple of meetings ago about where their process in terms of prioritizing water bodies and the data they use and assessments and things like that. And that was really, really helpful. And that kind of initiated, and Wes has been in the realignment process of Region 9. So we're strengthening our relationship and coordination with OEHA. And so I think the future is bright in terms of understanding where we are in their analysis process and how they use the data. And then I'll pass it to Wes in terms of where you are on PFAS or anything else OEHA centric that you want to add.
Sure. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, Lori, I just dropped a link in the chat about how our prioritization list goes. I mean, because as you're probably aware, there's a delay for fish sampling, results getting in seed in, and then for us to do the analysis, we also have the rest of the state to think about. So we go through our prioritization process to make sure we're getting the water bodies that are sort of we feel that are the most important based on a number of factors, such as environmental justice reasons, contamination reasons, and that document goes into further detail on that. And then for PFAS, that's something we are actively looking at and doing some scoping. So ATL development is not a quick process. So hopefully we'll be moving that along as fast as we can, but it's currently in its infancy. So
yeah.
Okay,
and I will add too, just for a broader lens, our data is not just used by OEHA, it's used by the water boards in our integrated report process, which happens every 2 years, as you all know. So just because OEHA might not be able to use the data at all or as quickly or whatever, the water boards is still using it to make decisions all the time. And I'll also add that as many of you are from the regional boards, so you all know this, preaching the choir here, but the regional boards are adopting and designating tribal beneficial uses, one of which is tribal subsistence. And when we get to the point of needing to protect tribal subsistence, we're going to need bioaccumulation data. So yeah, just because the data is not being used by OEHA doesn't mean it's still not valuable for the water boards. And then also with my partnerships with tribes, they want to see the data outside of all of that in other places. So just to add more wrenches to the question. Did you have anything else, any other questions or anything to add, Lori, before I move on to Allie?
Maybe one, and I'm hoping maybe other regional boards have ideas on this one is, we feel like for our region, we don't maybe have the best handle on where, high levels of fish consumption are occurring and with what species. So curious how other regions have gone about figuring that out so that, we were struggling with that part of the survey of, specific locations. And we actually, Kelly and I put together a survey to send to our internal water board staff related to fishing and things that they know, and starting to kind of gather just at least people in our offices, professional and personal experience. But yeah, curious, if anybody else has advice on how to go about, determining those locations in our region.
I think I saw Allie, Lauren, and Harry before you asked that question. So anyone from the regional boards want to chime in at this point? I know that's a big question that a lot of folks are facing. Worth longer discussion than right now.
We had, reaching out directly. We have tried in the past to reach out to CDFW, and I think we just never got to the right people or the right contacts, because we didn't really get very far. But we thought that that would be the best agency or entity out there to try and pull information out of. So
Kevin, I see you unmuted. Did you want to add your regional perspective here?
I will. I think it is a challenge. I guess we kind of had people who tended to somehow know this from long careers and kind of knowing fishing a little, and that just changed as people kind of come and go and through waterboard staff. I will say that there was a list that CDFW had that showed where fishing was possible, and so that was still a helpful website to kind of show where fishing occurred and what species were there. As a way, we actually use that to help designate beneficial uses for COM with that justification about 10 years ago. So I don't recall where it is right now, but if that sounds interesting, we can look that up and send it to you.
Yeah, if you can send that to me, Kevin, I can share it broadly. That'd be great.
Okay.
Last call for other regional folks to chime in before I go to Allie's question. Okay. Allie.
Hi. Sorry, I tried to chime in earlier, but I've got baby Nolan with me and he had things to say. So I just wanted to circle back. I hear you, Kevin and Lori. I think there have been report outs like that in the past, but for new staff, 100%, that's something we can do either through the Swamp Roundtable next year or through this platform, either or. I think it's a good place for that. So we hear you. And then the other point I wanted to make was, Lori, from the regional perspectives, I know it's slightly different. I think the surveys have been focused more on subsistence fishing, but I do know, and Kevin, you can probably speak to this more, but Region 2, I think, contracted out some work on that end. Region 4, LA, Emily Duncan also has a project going. There may be one other as well, but Emily will be talking about that project at the upcoming Swamp Roundtable next week on the 6th. It'll be short and sweet, but that might be someone to connect with as well. And I had something else, but it escaped me, so I'll raise my hand if I remember later.
Thanks, Allie.
Yep.
Lauren?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to address the piece of Lori's question that pertained to fish advisory development timeline and perhaps why there aren't advisories for data that came out in 2016. I just wanted to say we have probably 50 plus water bodies on our list where we have enough data to actually complete water bodies or complete advisory, excuse me, that we prioritize based on the link that Wes put in the chat. So you can read all about how we prioritize. We're contractually obligated to do 9 advisories every year. In the last few years, we've done more than that, including some, larger statewide advisories. So, it takes a while to develop them. We have our prioritization process. All that being said, we're always happy to hear local concerns. You may know things that we don't know about particular areas, and I am always happy to hear what your priorities are. So if you have something that's a priority for some reason I might not be aware of, we're always happy to discuss elevating those. So get in touch if you have any of those concerns.
Thanks, Lauren. Harry?
Yeah, I have a question that sort of relates to things that Kevin was asking about, Lori, Wes. One of the things I was wondering about is at which point OEHA is able to use the data. Does that depend on a final report, like for lakes and reservoirs? The Panel 4 report, I believe, has never been finalized because of the organics holdout. So is OEHA able to use the data from all of those analyses?
I don't want to speak for OEHA, so I'm going to let them go, but I think I know the answer.
Hi, Harry. We don't need to, well, it depends on the report. We don't necessarily have to wait until a swamp report or a particular study is finalized. We just wait till we have sufficient data. I threw another link to a sampling and analysis document we came up with, and that outlines our general process for developing advisories and minimum data criteria. So once those are met, they get on that list that Lauren had mentioned. And then we use the prioritization document to prioritize the list and number it. And we just move through that list unless we hear other reasons from whether it be regional boards or tribes or individuals to move certain water bodies up that list.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Is that list reprioritized like annually, or so if we are in maybe a rural or region, like is it possible our stuff just keeps kind of getting pushed down on the list? I just fine. I just trying to, get my head around how it works.
Do you want to answer, Lauren?
Yeah, sorry. We do reprioritize those every year. And you're talking about rural areas. One of the categories that we use is the distance to another water body with an advisory. So if there's, we want to give everybody a place to go, right? That's within an hour or two, hopefully, of where they live. So if you're in a more rural area, actually, a lot of times that would be, scored higher as a priority because there might not be another water body in the area to direct them to.
Yeah, and I think in the notes to this call that I'll send out, Lori, I'll include a link to the presentation that Lauren gave in August. I think it was Q3, where she kind of walked through all of those steps and prioritization and things like that. So I'll add that link to the notes. I think it's worth a watch if that's kind of where your head's at. It was really helpful for me to.
Sure, I can go back and look at that meeting too. So thank you for reminding me about that. I know I've missed a few.
It happens.
I may have missed that one.
No worries. Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, I think this has been a good process to think about OEHA's priorities and interests. And so I looked at the priority report really fast, but I didn't see the list. So it's like, oh, so maybe that's a different document that will have the list of the kind of ranked water bodies you're working on. So maybe if that's already going to come out, what you're going to send Anna, or if OEHA could put that in the chat, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, we generally provide that at the meetings or provide it annually to the stew. So it's not something that we post on our website because it is changing yearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think and actually during the presentation that Lauren gave, we noticed there was a mix up in like the water bodies and the region assignments. And actually Lauren submitted a corrected version. So the slides that are linked for that meeting, and again, I'll articulate like the where it is in the recording and the slide numbers from that meeting that has the list that they gave us earlier this year of their priority water bodies.
Okay.
Like
yeah, that's also something we've discussed, presenting annually or every other year, just to the stew, so everyone sort of knows where we're at for that year.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, well, it's good. So I think we just want to get a list of that, because then we maybe already know you're already working on something, and that's good to know. There's already enough data to answer some of those questions. So that's really helpful to have that for our planning. And then I thought something that wasn't in that, which is a question for OEHA, is do you have priorities where there isn't data? Because I'd say I used to know when we worked in the office, and Karen Taberski worked really closely with staff in OEHA and kind of knew where your data gaps were just from working in the same building and developing relationships. It's like Margie. And so are there, you've got a workload list and you're prioritizing existing data. Do you happen to have ideas on where you want to get future data? And if that's summarized, then point us to that direction. And if it's not, maybe that's something we could chat with you about at either regional level or something to see if you have some regional needs.
I think too, just so we're not putting OEHA on the spot for this entire time, they're included in the tribe agency and CBO partners. And so I'm hoping that the OEHA team will be able to kind of share their priorities again with us in January or February, so that they have time to like put everything together.
Yeah, I just had exec approval for it, so you'll be seeing it later today, Hannah.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll definitely.
In addition to the feedback form, we also went through and prioritized where we need data. And as you know, because we met with you earlier this year, and I don't know if Lauren came on to talk about that a little further. But take it away, Lauren, if you want to.
Yeah, I was just going to mention to Kevin that we did just complete an analysis of high contaminant water bodies where we have data gaps. So timely question. Currently, I'm working on developing a wish list for sampling for those high contaminant water bodies.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Well, it sounds like, I guess you'll be kind of mentioning that. So it's something either we could try to amplify that, but sometimes we have regional things where we can get to questions actually faster than a kind of a statewide long-term planning plan. So it could help to distribute that definitely down to the regions, and we can know what your wish list looks like. That'd be great.
Yeah, and maybe we can present our wish list in January or whenever is convenient. And then at the regular meeting, we could probably present our prioritized water bodies for the year.
Okay. Yeah.
Future agenda item, Anna.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, what's the one that I'm looking for? I want to note that like we're thinking long-term big picture right now to think about long-term planning, but we're still going to have every year an opportunity for folks to request additions and revisions or whatever to whatever the monitoring plans are. So I think Kevin, you and I had a call one-on-one earlier this week, submitting your template, by the November 30th, or if you need a little bit of extension, end of next week. I'm not going to hold you to that for the next 10 years. That would be very unkind. This is just kind of a pulse check of where we are now. And then every year we'll revisit. And then hopefully, every 5 years or so, we'll kind of do another pulse check and talk about how things might need to adapt to the needs of our future. So, yeah. I hope that helps. The template, particularly for the water boards, the template is meant to be a source of inspiration and help with holistic kind of brainstorming. It's not something that I'm going to say, well, Kevin said in 2023 that they only wanted these 3 water bodies, so we're not going to sample any other water bodies in Region 2. Like, that's not what this is for. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, I get that. I appreciate it. And I think it just helps like that. This was a gap in our thinking is we didn't think about OEHA's needs. So that's new to our thinking and being like, oh, well, how do we, what are the data that you already have available? So you'll I guess be able to articulate your own needs, but we're definitely interested in seeing that and integrating with OEHA's wish list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have quite a few water bodies on that high contaminant water body prioritization list. So we really love, feedback from the regional water boards to better refine that and, come up with a final list of priorities. Your input's very important in that too.
Yeah, and we'll be using, the March 27th and I think April 17th meetings to synthesize for the safety work group, but we can also group in our other partners in terms of synthesis and next steps and trends and things like that. So yeah, coming soon. Any other questions?
I guess I've got a question for DWQ, and no one is here from DWQ integrated report. So maybe, you can represent what they're thinking, but part of our thinking was that it actually will help to resample a number of impaired water bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Data are very old. In fact, data were analyzed a different way in the past. They're now being reanalyzed. Sometimes no one even has the old data. They're kind of lost. We just have a record of what it looked like, not the actual data from like the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of the 2000s that's non-swamp may not be, stored in CDN.
Mm-hmm.
And so resampling of existing impairments for mercury or PCBs is something we're looking at from a regional level. Is EWQ going to be able to mention their priorities?
Yeah, so I actually have a meeting with them later tomorrow, to kind of talk about that and loop them into the process, and get them on the schedule, because that's something that we wanted to hear from them too, right? Like we talk about how our data is used by integrated report, but we want to hear what integrated report needs to help inform that decision. So same wavelength there, and we're gonna loop them in for sure.
Okay, good. Well, it's definitely part of our thinking from a regional level, but I think it'll help to hear theirs on the statewide. And I guess just to share, evolving situation is that we used to list water bodies just based off the data alone. But right now there's a little challenge in that in the integrated report. And so it looks like we're going to base listings off of an OEHA advisory. So it just shows how much more important those advisories are in our listing process, for water bodies where there isn't COM as a designated beneficial use, which turns out there's a lot of water bodies that don't have this designation. So just kind of a nexus there with really making decisions based off of the OEHA advisories, both regional ones or statewide or reservoir specific.
Right. And just for folks that aren't kind of looped into that conversation, that is very specific to the COM advisory or the COM beneficial use, which is why the tribal beneficial uses process and the beneficial use designation process at the regional boards is so important to designate water bodies with subsistence and tribal subsistence so that they can be assessed by integrated report directly. But again, that's a whole other process that regions are going through that takes time of its own.
Yeah, another solution to that is to actually regions just designating COM, which is an easier bar than some of the new standards to have a listing and draw attention to it. But in addition, where those other uses are occurring, then they should be designated as well.
Yeah. Any other questions about the process? What's coming next? If not, then we don't have to stay till 12 and I can let you go. All right. Oh yeah, Kevin, you unmuted?
I guess that was one thought. Well, I thought Jay just knows his program like history so well. And I did wonder, is he someone we could tap into on the have we answered the questions yet kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he's not here because he had other commitments, but yeah, he's part of the Stu crew for statewide stuff. So we'll definitely be leveraging both Jay and Autumn's wisdom and expertise to answer that question and present that at a later date. Absolutely.
Cool. All right, thanks.
And he knows I'm presenting without him, just so everyone knows. I'm not like just going rogue without Jay. So the next meeting is for December 20th. I've heard confirmation from the San Diego Regional Board that they'll be able to present their priorities. And I'll, after probably next week, I'll try and get that agenda up for December. So that's why it's important for folks to tell me if the water boards regions are available for December or January. And then if I hear from everyone and I can do the January agenda, I'll do that too. I'll also be coordinating with the regional boards in terms of coordinating how long your presentations will be and things like that. So more on that soon. As I mentioned, water boards folks, if you can get me your template by the 30th, please, please, please do. If you need another week, that's totally fine, but let me know that you're working on it. So, and that I can expect something from you by, where's my calendar? December 8th. And also if you're available December 20th or January 4th, if you have availability constraints within those time blocks, please let me know that too, so I can accommodate you in the agendas as I develop them. If you're a member of a tribe, another California state agency or community-based organization, you're interested in sharing your priorities as part of this process, I want to hear from you. As I mentioned, by January 1st, I just need to know that you're interested in presenting and how you'd like to present. If you want to use the external partner template, great. If not, also great. And the day and time block that you're available to present. So much more flexibility and leniency for our tribal agency and community-based organization partners. But that's great. Again, if you're not able to present or complete a template, but you still want to provide feedback, there's a different way for you to do so through that survey. Again, for multiple choice questions, it can be, you know, done in 5 minutes if you don't want to add tons of detail, which is totally fine. As we talked about earlier, there's a lot of Zoom registration links because of our new email list system. I can't send out calendar invitations to the Safety Workgroup email list. So the best way to get calendar holds for any or all of these meetings is to register for the Zoom calls and then download the calendar invites. And the calls through the end of next year, along with their registration links, will be on the website in December. I will post this recording and a notes document. I'm hopeful to get it out this week. So folks can share that with their team members if needed. And that's it. I hope to see y'all in December. Go Stu. Oh yeah, Autumn.
Brendan put in the chat, how do groups access the survey?
It's open to the public. This guy? Is that the right survey?
I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how do they access the survey?
That's a link. So I will post all of the links to everything on the Safety Workgroup page, front and center, to make it easier to find. But okay. If you have a group in mind, you can forward them the slide deck or the notes, and that's a link to the survey.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Any other final thoughts? Awesome. Well, thanks everyone, and see y'all later.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Everyone.
Bye-bye. Have a nice evening.